Hi, I'm Jira. I've been doing this YouTube thing for like a year or so now, and I've only done unscripted content like chill builds and learning 60 card magic, so I decided to do something scripted, and I figured I would do a breakdown and guide of an EDH deck I really like. I was going to do the Gitrog monster since it was the first deck I ever made, but I figured it already has a chill builds, and it's a bit more complex than what we're doing today, as well as having multiple playstyles to go for. Instead, I decided to pick one of my favorites, Strefan, Maurer, Progenitor. We're going to go over the commander, talk about what playstyles we'll go for, and then we'll do a card by card in different categories. Some things to note before we begin: I am not an expert, this is just my opinion on the deck, and cards I personally run, so do not take this as gospel. Also, we're not going to go over all 100 cards in the deck, this is just more so a highlight for each category. So I guess without further ado, let's get into the commander. Strefan Maurer Progenitor is a 3/2 legendary vampire noble with flying that reads: at the beginning of your end step, create a blood token for each player who lost life this turn, and whenever it attacks, you can sacrifice 2 blood tokens to put a vampire card from your hand onto the battlefield, tapped and attacking with indestructible until the end of the turn. Blood tokens, for anyone that doesn't know, are colorless artifact tokens that let you pay 1 mana and sacrifice it to discard 1 card and draw 1 card. Let's go over Strefan more closely. The first thing that you'll notice is that you get a blood token for each player who lost life, including you. It also puts any vampire on the field and makes it indestructible for that turn. Another thing is that you can sacrifice the blood tokens without playing a vampire if you ever need artifact sack triggers to activate, but don't have a vampire in hand. It's not gonna come up much, but I could see a universe where it does. Strefan is a pretty good card. It gives you the blood tokens, has multiple playstyles you can focus on, and its flying makes it a little bit tough to deal with in combat. Its main issue is that it can be a target, since it can get out of hand with blood generation and cheating in vampires, and since it doesn't have haste, it can be tough sometimes against techs with a lot of removal. A lot of the time you're going to play Strefan and have to wait a whole turn rotation before you can attack with it and trigger its ability. I recommend cards like Swiftfoot Boots and Lightning Greaves, which not only gives it haste, but also hexproof, so it's harder to deal with. So the deck is clearly going to be Vampire Typal, but there is more to it than that. The blood tokens open up plenty of doors for you, from stuff with madness to cards that trigger whenever you discard a card, to artifact synergies, to token synergies, to just filling up your graveyard with creatures to revive later. You also need to ensure that as many players lose life on your turn as possible. You can do this with flying vampires that are evasive, but the easiest way to do it, and the one we'll be focusing on, are artifacts, enchantments, and spells in general that make multiple people lose 1 life. We'll break this into multiple categories of cards, discard top picks for cards in each category, then at the end we'll playtest some hands and I'll show you the final deck list that I made. Let's start with madness and discard stuff, since that's the category that I think will be the easiest to do. The first card we're going to talk about is Falconwrath Gorger, which is a 2/1 Vampire Berserker that gives all of your vampires madness. That means you can cast them when they're discarded at basically instant speed. It's not technically instant speed, but you understand. This makes blood tokens something worth cracking more often for a draw, since you can activate an ability to make you discard a card during your opponent's turn and cast a discarded card if need be. It doesn't come up too often, not a ton of vampires here benefit from waiting for your opponent's turn to cast them, but it has come up before for me. I wish it gave at least a bit of a reduced cost, like reducing it by 1 or 2, but it's still a great card for the deck as it is. The second card is called the Bloodline, which is an enchantment that costs 1 and a black and lets you pay 1 mana and discard a card to make a Vampire Knight token with lifelink. This is a very simple discard outlet in case you're low on blood tokens or need to save them for the artifact synergies. The lifelink on the tokens also helps a lot because you're going to lose a lot of life and you might need to gain that back. The fact that it's instant speed makes them create decent blockers, and it not being a once per turn in any way can help when you have multiple madness effects or you need to fill your grave as much as possible. The tokens being knights also help, as there's a card in the deck that helps knights specifically, but we'll get to that when we get to that. The next card we're going to talk about is Faith of the Devoted. This is an enchantment that costs 2 and a black and lets you pay 1 mana whenever you discard a card to make each opponent lose 2 life and get you gain 2 life. Normally this would not be the best card to run. It's specifically a payoff that doesn't do a ton to further the game state unless you already have a lot of mana to go around and a lot of discard outlets. In Strefan specifically though, it's great. The fact that Strefan goes off of any lost life means that if you do this once on your turn, you're making 3 blood tokens at minimum during your end step, while also giving you some life back, since you want to damage yourself and get to 4 tokens a turn most of the time. Another card that may be worth running is Gyre's Sanatorium, which taps for a colorless mana and has the ability to pay 2 mana and force each player to rummage. I personally don't like it that much since your blood tokens are usually enough for discard outlets, and this takes up a land play for your turn in a deck that needs the mana, but I could see justification for running it if you really want to. Terminal Agony is a basic Rakdos removal spell that costs 2, a black and a red. This sounds terrible until you realize it has a madness cost of just red and a black. This lets you do some stuff with discarding on an opponent's turn to destroy a creature for 2 mana, and it doesn't have any prerequisites, it destroys any creature. While this doesn't sound that great due to the fact that there are less conditional removal spells, this one has the added benefit of letting you draw a card off a blood token, as well as removing any creature at the same time. I like it, but can totally see you wanting to cut it. Markov Baron is another card with Madness I run, but I'll talk about it in the Vampire Typal section instead. Now for cards I personally have not run at any point, but you might want to if you like the look of them. I'll go into less detail for these since I haven't tested them personally that much. Anya Falconwrath can give you a decent draw engine if you have enough cards with Madness, especially if you have Falconwrath Gorger out. Bitter Tramp is a removal spell that makes you discard a card or pay 3 life to destroy a creature for 1 and a black. I can totally see you wanting to run this because you either discard a card, which triggers Madness, or you lose a life, which makes Strefan give you another token at your end step. I personally feel I would rather run better removal in general, but it's a card I'd consider. Draw spells that make you discard. Most of the red draw spells like Thrill of Possibility and cards like it let you discard a card to draw cards, which can trigger Madness. I personally don't run these as the Madness engine I have is minimal, but if you have more Madness cards than I end up having, then you should definitely run these. Bog Witch is okay. You can tap a black mana and it to discard a card and add 3 black mana to your mana pool. I don't personally run it, but I could see people really liking it. It not being a vampire kind of hurts, but that isn't a big deal most of the time. Alms of the Vein is an okay drain spell, but I don't feel like it does enough since all it does is drain. Anya's Ravager can work if you focus more on the discard aspect, and your hand is near empty a lot, but my build has decent draw power and isn't super focused on the discarding. Biting Rain is an okay board wipe at instant speed, but I prefer similar spells I'm already running. Curse of Fool's Wisdom is nice, but it can make you a target, and it's out of my personal budget, being $5 or $6 at the moment. Cult in the Netherworld can be okay recovery. And Under the Floorboards can flood the board with zombies and gain life, but I don't feel like it's needed. Shadow Range Archfiend is good, but I feel like my build already has a lot of high mana creatures, and this one is not a vampire I can cheat in, so it ended up not being used a lot and being sort of a brick even with the madness cost. Finally, Hellmongrel not only gets you a decent body at 4/3 for 3 mana, but it also lets you have an infinite discard outlet if you need to. Again, my build isn't madness focused, so I don't run it. Now that the discard stuff is done, we're going to move on to the Vampire Typal aspect of the deck next. Note that there will be some crossover with other categories, but these are the cards whose main purpose is to help vampires and reward you for playing vampires. Cordial Vampire is a creature that puts a +1/+1 counter on each of your vampires whenever another creature dies. It's a nice way to make all of your vampires bigger over the course of the game. There's some sack outlets in here too, so this can get out of hand pretty fast. Not much to say about it, it's just a generally good creature that's pretty good to play early game since it's only 2 mana. Dominating Vampire lets you take control of another creature whose mana value is equal to or less than the number of vampires you control for the turn. A lot of the time this could be a dead card, since if you play it by itself you only get a 1 mana creature, but if you play it late game, you can easily steal a great creature and use it, even sacrificing it with another card to get rid of it easily. I would understand cutting it, but I do like it and it could lead to some fun moments. Indulgent Aristocrat costs just 1 mana, has lifelink, and lets you pay 2 mana and sacrifice a creature to put a +1/+1 counter on all of your vampires. If you have a Cordial out, you get 2 counters on each. It's also just a generally okay sack outlet. The lifelink can come up from time to time, and it just costs 1 mana. Markov Baron gives all of your vampires +1/+1, has lifelink, and you can cast it for its madness cost, which is reduced by the number of creatures you tap. If you have a lot of tokens out, you can discard this with some effect, tap down your tokens to play this for free, and give your vampires a boost. I really like this card, and it's one of my favorites in the deck. I'm a sucker for lords, what can I say? Midnight Arsonist allows you to destroy artifacts equal to the number of vampires you control. I've been tempted to cut this before, since it can't hit mana rocks, but I feel destroying 2 or 3 artifact creatures, equipment, and so on makes it worth it depending on your playgroup. If your playgroup doesn't play a lot of non-mana rock artifacts, I could see cutting this. Sanctum Seeker is a vampire that costs 2 and 2 black for a 3/4 that lets you drain an opponent for each attacking vampire whenever you attack. If you can get a big board out, you can do a lot of damage and gain a whole lot of life. Even if you don't have a lot of vampires, it's another way to ensure that Strefan will give you 3 blood tokens minimum on your turn. Note that if you cheated in with Strefan, it won't trigger that turn because it's already attacking. The attacks are already declared. The next few will probably be really fast. They're all just generally good cards. I don't have a ton to talk about. Stormkirk Captain gives all of your vampires first strike as well as a +1/+1 boost, which can make it easier for Strefan to take down flyers, which are an issue in this deck since it only has 2 toughness. Vampire Socialite is a 2/2 with Menace, and whenever a vampire enters under your control, gives them a +1/+1 counter if an opponent lost life this turn. Obviously this is good since your main goal is to drain an opponent over time. Rakish Air is a vampire that gives all of your vampires a +1/+1 counter whenever they deal combat damage. Not much to say, it's just a good card. I can understand cutting it, I guess, but I really like it. Stensia Masquerade gives all of your attacking creatures first strike and puts a +1/+1 counter on a vampire when they deal combat damage. It's basically Rakish Air but on an enchantment while also giving them first strike. They even have the same mana cost. I can see some people thinking these are redundant with one another, but I feel they work since they do stack, if that matters to you. Molten Echoes creates a temporary copy of any vampire you play, which can cause some fun interactions with effects stacking as well as getting death triggers if you ever make a legendary vampire with it, while also getting some ETBs from them if possible. I do like this card and think it's super fun with a lot of possibilities. The tokens do die at the end step and it's by exile so you don't get death triggers, but it still has utilities. Another thing to note about it is it's only when they enter, meaning Strefan will trigger this. As for vampire stuff I'd consider, but haven't tested or looked into much. Bloodline Keeper can give your vampires a massive boost, and lets you easily swarm with tokens. It's just out of my budget being 20 bucks or so. If you can afford it, it's great. Stormkirk Condemned is an infinite discard outlet that boosts your vampires, but I don't run enough madness synergies for it to be worth it. If you do, I'd look into it. Voldaren Ambusher is an easy way to deal damage to a creature and deal with planeswalkers, but I feel like there's better removal available. If you need more removal in your personal build, it's an okay option. Urge Defeat is an okay removal spell that can make your vampires bigger, but I replaced it with a removal spell I like more that came out in Modern Horizons 3 that we'll talk about later. Timothar, the Baron of Bats, is a cool card to cheat in with Strefan and can make your vampires way harder to deal with, but I feel it's too easily removed. If one of the bats die, you lost the associated vampire forever, and it's annoying to keep track of which vampire is associated with which bat. I don't like it. I can see someone else liking it. I just think it's a bit risky. Scion of Opulence is a nice way to make treasures and let you impulse draw by sacrificing your blood tokens, but I feel creatures on my side don't die often enough to warrant it. It does nothing a lot of the time. Queen Bay's Paladin is good. I just hate finality counters. If you have no bias to hating those fucking things that ruined Revival, please stop them. I hate my shit getting eggs. I run it if you like. Roaming Throne is unfun and too expensive. Fuck that card, it ruined deck building. Now let's move on to cards that make blood tokens. Obviously this is one of, if not the, most important part of the deck, so this section might be a little long. Let's get into it, I guess. Anya, Maid of Dishonor, is a legendary vampire that gives you a blood token the first time a vampire enters under your control, and that you pay 2 mana and sacrifice a vampire or a blood token to drain each opponent for 2. This is one of the best cards in the deck. It lets you make blood tokens consistently while also giving you a sack outlet for blood and creatures. And it drains each opponent for 2, which makes Strefan make 3 more tokens. So you can sacrifice a blood token, drain everybody, and then you get 3 during the end step. Definitely run it. Belligerent Guest is a 3/2 with Trample that makes a blood token whenever it deals combat damage to an opponent. It's just a general nice way to make blood tokens and to get over chump blockers and still do damage. Not the best, but I like it. Bloodpetal Celebrant is a 2/1 with first strike when it attacks, and it also gives you a blood token when it dies. It's a decent creature to sacrifice. Having 1 toughness and being only 2 mana makes it easily recurable with stuff like Driver of the Dead, Call of the Death Dweller, and so on. I'd say it's pretty good. Blood Tithe Harvester costs only a red and a black, and makes a blood token when it enters, but the important part is that you can sacrifice it to make a creature get -X/-X, where X is the number of blood tokens you control. This is a great ability that can get around indestructible, make a massive creature small enough to swing over without fear of your creature dying, and it's a death trigger if you run a lot of payoffs. One of the best cards in the deck. Exsanguinator Cavalry is a vampire knight with menace and lifelink that gives your knights +1/+1 and makes a blood token when they deal combat damage to a player. There's not a lot of knights in this, but it's a knight itself, and Faith of the Devoted makes knights, so I can see cutting this if you think you don't run enough knights to justify it, but especially with menace, it can get pretty big on its own since it's hard to block at times. Falconwrath Forebear costs 2 and a black for a 3/1 flyer that can't not block, and makes a blood token when she deals combat damage to a player. She also lets you revive her by playing a black mana and sacrificing 2 blood tokens. It's a recursive creature that is a consistent way to make blood. Not much more to say, I think she's great. Camber the Plunderer has lifelink and makes a blood token whenever your opponent's creatures die, while also gaining you more life. It also has partner, but I'm not super into the creature that she partners with. I get the idea is to goad your opponent and let creatures die that way. I don't know, I just don't like it. Camber is great and I definitely run it. I just don't like his partner. Olivia's Attendants costs 4 and 2 red, has menace, and makes blood tokens equal to the damage it deals to an opponent. It also lets you pay some mana to deal 1 damage. Ideally add an opponent to trigger Strefan an extra time and make blood. I really like it. It's one of the more consistent ways to make blood, as if you can get to attack with her, she can make up to 6 blood tokens if you attack someone that can't get past the menace. It does cost a lot of mana, but vampires are easy to cheat in with this deck. Glasscast Heart makes blood whenever you attack with one or more vampires, and also lets you pay a black and 1 life to make a lifelink vampire token. The third effect lets you sack 13 blood tokens to drain each opponent for 13. This has never even come close to coming up in any game I've ever played in the deck. I suppose it could. The main draw is the first effect, which at least guarantees a blood token each turn, and the second ensures you lose a life with Strefan and make a lifelinker, which makes it so you can get the 1 life you lost back easily. Ceremonial Knife is a 1-mana equipment that equips for 2, gives the equipped creature +1/+0, and lets you make a blood token whenever it deals damage. At first I wasn't super into the card, until I realized it makes blood when it deals combat damage in general. Meaning if it deals combat damage to a creature, battle, planeswalker, whatever, it still counts. That turned it from bad to pretty decent in my opinion. I get if you don't think it's worth it though. Arterial Alchemy, I hope I pronounced that right, makes a blood for each opponent when it enters, and turns your blood into equipment that gives the creature +2/+0. I haven't used the blood as equipment that much, but there have been times where equipping a few blood tokens to a creature won me the game. If you don't see yourself using that equip ability a lot, I could see cutting this. Blood Fountain makes a blood token when it enters, and lets you sack it and pay 3 and a black to get back 2 creatures from your graveyard to your hand. Not tons to say, cheap card, makes you blood, gives you artifact synergies, is okay recovery, you know? Ivor Insatiable Air is a new creature from Foundations. It costs 1 and a red for a 1/1 with trample that makes blood tokens whenever it enters or attacks, and it gets a +1/+1 counter whenever you discard a card. If you have enough discard outlets or plan to use blood tokens as a draw tool and not exclusively for Strefan and artifact sack outlets, this is a good card to run in my opinion. It won't be on my deck list though, because this was announced after I recorded the deck list, so you know. Voldaren Estate is a land that lets you pay a life to add a mana of any color when you're casting a vampire. This would normally be fine, it makes you lose life for Strefan. I would recommend other cards if it wasn't for the fact that you could pay 5 mana, -1 for each of your vampires to make a blood token. This can help in a pinch by ensuring you make a blood every turn and constantly have a way to do it, since land removal is so uncommon in Commander. Other cards in here also make blood, but it's going to be in a different category since that's not its main use. Alright, rapid fire time for cards that I do not run but could see someone wanting to run. Gluttonous Guest makes a blood when it enters and gains you life whenever you sacrifice a blood token, which makes Strefan give you 4 life with its ability, turns your artifact sack outlets into life gain, and gives you more incentive to crack the tokens. I just feel I have enough life gain, and it more so is the least good blood creature I had when I wanted to make cuts, rather than being a bad creature. Moonstone Urologist is decent, but I feel 5 mana holds it back. If this was a vampire bat, it'd be great since you can cheat it in easily. But since it's a bat warlock, it's a bit too hard to get out, seeing as the deck's ramping ability isn't that great in general. Voldaren Epicure is another case of me needing to take something out to put in a different card, and I feel like this was an okay thing to take out. If you have room for it, run it. I personally don't though. Transmutation Front is a bit steep at 5 mana to make 1 Blood token a turn, and there's not that many artifacts in the deck that are game changers to the point of running stuff that also makes treasures, clues, or food. If you like it and run enough treasure or clue support, go for it, I guess. Voldaren Bloodcaster is fine. It makes a blood when your creatures die and lets you transform it. The issue is I don't have enough sack outlets to warrant this, and I feel like making 1 blood token into a 2/2 bat per turn it's nothing. Like, that's not what you want to use your blood tokens for. Run it if you want, but it's not something I'm interested in. Next up is cards that get better with blood tokens. Kind of a broad category, but it's stuff that gets better when you sacrifice an artifact, stuff that gets better if you have a ton of artifacts out, and stuff that gets better when you specifically have a lot of blood out. This will 100% be a smaller section compared to the others, I'm sure, but it's important enough to get a category in my opinion, especially because it is like a main thing for the deck. Vat of Rebirth is a 1 mana artifact that gets an oil counter whenever any artifact or any creature dies and hits any graveyard. Then lets you remove 4 of those counters to revive any creature from your graveyard for 3 mana. This is obviously great, and one of my favorite cards of all time, honestly. Strefan sacks 2 artifacts with its own effect, and it sees any creature or any artifact hitting any graveyard, so your opponents are going to put a lot of counters on this too. It doesn't even sacrifice itself to revive it, and you can do it turn after turn after turn. It's fucking great. Inspiring Statuary gives all of your creatures improvise, meaning your blood tokens can reduce the cost of them by 1 for each. This can get insane really quick, sometimes giving a reduction of 3, 4, or even 5 fucking mana. It doesn't produce colored mana, but there's some big vampires in here that need 3 or 4 or more generic mana. This can help a ton if your Strefan keeps getting removed too. Mirkwood Bats, while also fitting the vampire theme since they're bats, lets you make your opponent lose 1 life every time you sacrifice a blood or make a blood. This can get insane when you make multiple in a turn, and Olivia's Attendants getting in and making 4 or maybe 5 blood tokens with its effect can get you to 10 or 11 damage total very quickly. I recommend it 100%, one of the best cards in the deck. Well, that's about it. I told you it'd be a short section. Now here's the ones that I do not run, but you can. Jury Master of the Review is a great payoff for blood tokens that can close games, but I feel it makes the deck too similar to my Prosper deck. Same can be said for Marionette Master, Mayhem Devil, and so on. These are all great cards that can win the game out of nowhere, but that can get really boring, and since I run them all in Prosper, I decided to not have the redundancy. Lich Knight's Conquest is a mass revival spell if you have enough artifacts to sacrifice, but it does deplete all your blood tokens, and I feel like you need to get rid of at least 3 or 4 blood tokens to make it great. Pitiless Carnage is a tolerable draw spell that lets you draw equal the amount of blood tokens you sacrifice, but since it's 4 mana, and there are 2 mana spells that draw 2, and 3 mana ones that draw more, plus draw spells like Pact of the Serpent that make you lose nothing, triggers Strefan, and let you draw 5 or 6 plus cards for 3 mana, I personally do not like Pitiless Carnage, but understand if somebody would. Crime Novelist gets bigger and adds a red mana whenever you sacrifice an artifact. The issue I have with it is the most consistent sack outlet is Strefan, and since that triggers on attack, the 2 red mana you'll get can only be used in combat. It's fine, I do like it, it's just not something I run. Cranial Plating, Cranial Ram, and Nettle Cyst all have similar utility of being a good finisher. There have been multiple times where I had 5 or 6 blood tokens, attach this to one of the creatures, and it wins me the game. Again, I run these in Prosper and wanted to make the decks feel more different from each other. If you do not have an issue and find that you can't close games that well, I do recommend them. And that's it for all the blood token payoffs. There's probably more, but I guess we might get into that with the deck list itself. Next up is vampires we can cheat in. Okay, this is the most subjective part of the video. Big vampires to cheat in. The issue is, literally play any big vampires you like, find interesting or fun. That's it, it's just whichever ones you like. Here are some I run. Westgate Regent has flying and a great ward cost, and it gets bigger for each combat damage it deals. This can get out of hand very fast. I've cheated this out decently fast in the first few turns of a game before, and it quickly becomes a 16/16 flyer that costs a discard to deal with effectively. Patron of the Vein exiles anything sent to your opponent's graveyard, and makes your vampires bigger in the process. I can see this being an unfun card, since it can just shut down entire decks sometimes, but it's too cool not to run for me. I'm half considering taking this out, as my play group hates it, but for now it's in. I like it. Olivia Crimson Bride can revive a vampire every turn, and as long as you sacrifice the vampires before you control no legendary vampires, there's very little downside to this. If you're not afraid of exile like I am, I can totally see you going crazy with this and taking more risks with it. Nirkana Revenant doubles all of your swamps mana-wise, which can cause super explosive turns, as well as feeding into its own ability to make it bigger for a final push. It costs a lot of mana, but you can get out with Strefan or Aspiring Statuary, and you can tap on the attack declaration. It can lead to insane stuff. Crossway Troublemakers lets you pay 2 life to draw a card whenever a vampire dies, and gives all your vampires Death Touch and Lifelink. This deters blocking, and can give you some pretty good life gain in the process, as well as a small draw engine if you need it. Bloodline Necromancer lets you revive a vampire or wizard when it enters, meaning you can cheat it in with Strefan and also get another vampire. It's just a generally good revival creature. Champion of Dusk lets you draw cards equal to the number of vampires you control and lose the same life. Not only is this a nice way to draw a bunch of cards during the combat step, when it's harder to deal with, but the life loss can trigger Strefan to give you another blood token. For this section, I can't really recommend anything, since again, it's just whatever vampires you happen to like or want to cheat in. Section intentionally left blank. On to the next section. Another aspect that's important to the deck is ways to damage everyone and ways to gain life so you can recover the life that you pay back. So arguably I'm combining 2 categories here, but they're too similar to warrant them being separated into their own category, especially since a lot of the cards that do one do the other. So we're just going to combine them. Vron Executor Thane is a Phyrexian vampire that lets you make your opponents lose 2 life and make you gain 2 life whenever a creature you control dies. 1 death trigger and you're getting 3 blood tokens with your commander, which isn't too shabby. Kinda sucks that it doesn't count itself. It being a once per turn can be annoying sometimes, but it's still a pretty decent card. Oni Cult Anvil lets you make a 1/1 servo token when an artifact is sacrificed, which is fine. It gives you okay blockers at the very least. The important part is that it lets you tap it and sacrifice an artifact to ping each opponent for 1, which you already know by now, triggers Strefan. It also gives you any triggers from sacrificing an artifact and or token, and lets you trade 1 blood token for 3, plus a damage to each opponent. That's pretty good in my opinion. Creeping Bloodsucker is a vampire that drains each opponent for 1 during each of your upkeeps, making sure that you're getting 3 bloods while also gaining some life back. Not much to say, it's a good card for 2 mana and gives you some early game plays. Vampire's Kiss drains any opponent for 2 life and makes 2 blood tokens. It's not the best card, and I could totally see you wanting to cut this, but I personally think the fact that it makes 2 blood tokens, while also gaining you some life and making an opponent lose life is really good for 2 mana. Cryptolith Fragment is an artifact that costs 3 mana, enters tapped, and lets you tap it for a mana of any color, then makes every player lose 1 life. Tap this once, and Strefan is making 4 blood tokens at your end step. And it's also not a terrible mana rock. It also transforms into some mid-Eldrazi when each player has 10 or less life. That's not going to come up from my experience, especially in a fucking 4-player format like Commander. Rakdos Charm is already a good card in a Rakdos deck, but the last effect is even better in here since I'll trigger Strefan and can even win games. As for cards I don't run, Acolyte of Aklazotz, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, is a way to convert 1 blood token into 3 while also being a cheap and okay 1/4 blocker, which the deck does need for early game. The only reason I don't run is because I haven't found any space for it, but I'm planning on adding it at some point. Agent of the Iron Throne is a background that gives Strefan the ability to ping each opponent for 1 life every time an artifact or creature you control is put into your graveyard. I personally don't like cards that do nothing if your commander's not out, so I personally do not run it. Arterial Flow, however you pronounce it, makes each opponent discards 2 cards and drains them for 2 if you have a vampire. My playgroup isn't huge on forced discard effects and we don't like it, outside of maybe forced rummaging or wheels, so I don't run it for that reason. If your playgroup's more cool forced discard, go right on ahead. Ayara, first of Locked Thwain, drains each opponent for 1 when a black creature attacks, but I feel like she's not a vampire. She costs 3 black mana with no non-colored mana, can make her a bit awkward to play, especially since you have a decent amount of red creatures. Anything with Extort. Extort is just a good ability in the deck in general. I don't run any because the deck isn't super spell slingery, so there can be turns where you just don't play a lot of spells. I can see you wanting them. Run Extort spells if you feel the need to. You guys ready for a super micro section? It's ramp time. Rakdos is not super known for its ramp, so this will be basic and short as hell, but In terms of mana rocks, we got Soul Ring and Arcane Signet, you know, the usual. I also do like the tap signets, even if a lot of people don't, so I run Rakdos Signet. Cryptolith Fragment's a mana rock that synergizes well with your playstyle. If it counts, Inspiring Sanctuary reduces the cost of your creatures by giving them Improvise. As for the stuff you can run, I really like Felwar Stone. There's also a lot of treasure makers in Rakdos like Deadly Dispute and Big Score, and those help a lot. Academy Manufactor gets you a treasure with your blood tokens, and that can help since you make a lot of those. Stuff like Mind Stone and Commander Sphere are good here since they're artifacts that sacrifice themselves, which can trigger artifact graveyard synergies. You can also run Burnished Heart and Solemn Simulacrum for the same reason. They trigger stuff that triggers when an artifact is put into your graveyard. It's just kind of the basic mana rocks that you'd want to run. The talismans are okay in here too, because they make you lose one life. There's, you know, treasure and good mana rocks. That's basically it. Alright, final section before we get to lands. These are just the cards I run that don't fit any of the other categories. And there's a decent bit of them, so I'll try to go fast. Swiftfoot Boots is really good in here, and I would run Lightning Greaves if it wasn't expensive. The deck works a lot better if you can give Strefan haste and protect it, so that it doesn't die immediately, and you can trigger its ability on the turn that it comes out. In terms of revival, I really like Victimize. Apparently that's an unpopular opinion, but I like it. It gives you a sack outlet while also reviving 2 creatures. Sure, they enter tapped, but that's worth it, in my opinion. I also run Sinister Waltz, just because I find it a lot of fun. In terms of removal, I run Olivia's Wrath, Blasphemous Act, Vampire's Vengeance if that counts, and Vandal Blast for board wipes. I run Feed the Swarm for target removal as well as Terminal Agony and Consuming Corruption. I feel like I should add more, but the amount I have currently is doing fine as is. If your playgroup requires it, I would add more. For draw, you honestly don't need a ton since blood tokens, rummaging helps. We run Night's Whisper since it makes you lose life, Pointed Discussion since it also makes you lose life and make a blood token. You also have some draw outlets on creatures that trigger when a creature dies. Lands are probably the most subjective part of the deck building process outside of like the big vampires you can cheat in this deck. Lands I like, you could hate, and vice versa, so I'll just quickly break down my lands without as much reasoning. I tend to run 10 or 11 of each basic land for a 2-color deck, so for a total of around 20 to 22 or so basic lands. In this case, I run 10 mountains and 11 swamps, since black is a bit more important here. Then we have the obvious ones, Commander Tower, Exotic Orchard, Rogue's Passage, Path of Ancestry, and Unclaimed Territory, the usual lands for Typal decks. I also really like Bojuka Bog. Canyon Slough as a discard outlet's pretty good. Uh, as we said earlier, Voldaren Estate and Gyre Sanatorium's pretty good. I like the Signet lands like Shadowblood Ridge, but I know a lot of people don't for some reason. I really like Smoldering Marsh, Tainted Peak, Temple of Malice. I'd run the Surveil lands if I could. I still run the bounce lands. I know some people cut them out of their decks, but I just can't. I like them too much. But yeah, lands are subjective. Run the lands you like. Hopefully it turns out to be around 36. That's how much I run. Hi, time for the final section, I guess. This is how the deck ended up turning out. We have 34 creatures, 10 sorceries, 11 artifacts, 3 instants, 5 enchantments. These are cards I forgot to mention for the most part. I guess I mentioned these two. I did not mention Underhanded Designs or Yahani Undying Partisan, but they're here. I kind of don't want to do by card because I'm already fucking like I already kind of did that in the video. This part's unscripted if you can't tell. Like I'm just kind of yapping, man. Um Overall, I feel like this deck is good. I've had good experiences with it. I haven't played it in a pod in a while. I've mostly been playing this 1v1 with my partner. But when I did play it in pods when my play group was more active, uh it did turn out pretty fucking good. I think there's some things I forgot to mention. I kind of want to take out Terminal Agony because we have some other removal spells like Consuming Corruption and we have another one. I just don't remember where it is. Feed the Swarm and stuff. But I don't know yet. If I did take out Terminal Agony, I kind of want to replace it with a better removal spell. I might replace it with one of these though. Acolyte of Alkalots is really good. Aklazotz, I don't know, I'm sorry. Aklazotz, sorry. But like all these are pretty good. I don't know about this one. I don't know if I'd run underhanded designs or not. But you know how it is. I guess we're gonna do some playtest hands. This is how the mana percentage came out, or whatever. it's still like there's cards that I recommended if your deck looks more like this, like 67% of black and 38% of red. I did like talk about some cards I think that only help with black creatures or black mana, and I'm not running those specifically because like I only would do that if this was a bit higher and this was a bit lower, but you know how it is. Okay, let's do this a few times without looking and then play test. Let's see what we can do with this hand. I'd put down a I can't do anything turn 1, so I'd put down a Path of Ancestry. It enters tapped and then next turn. Goodness. Mountain. Do I have anything that's 2 mana? I don't think so. I have something that's 3. So next turn I can do something. Wait, does this enter tapped? No, it doesn't. Okay, we're good. Let's go with Valdarin Estate. Colorless, red, doesn't matter. I guess it does. Colorless, red, red, I don't know. Belligerent Guest. When it ETBs, I can scry 1. I really do need another creature right now, so I'm going to put this at the bottom and hope that I don't regret that. Yeah, trample, and when she deals combat damage, it makes a blood token. I get her and Olivia's Attendants mixed up because they're kind of similar. Rakdos Signet, that's good, I guess. Command Tower. 1, 2, Rakdos Signet. We can play our Commander, right? Because that's 4, so it's 1, 2. We can only do 3. We can't do that right now, but soon. We don't have anything else that's 2 mana, so I think we're good. Swiftfoot Boots is amazing. Now I wish we had that swamp so we can, you know, make Strefan and then put Swiftfoot Boots on it. But we can't do both in the same turn, sadly, because we have, that's 4. We need 6 mana, so 2, 3, 4, 5, because one of these has to be tapped for it. I guess I'll make it in, I'll do 2 in a red and make this. When it enters the battlefield, I create a blood token for each opponent I have. Technically, I have 0 opponents, but you know how it is. You know how it is. I have 3 opponents, and normally, you know, so that's what we're doing. Blood is equipment now, but that doesn't really matter. Let's say we swing with this and it deals combat damage because it's kind of early in the game. So we're going to make a 4th blood token. Ain't looking good, Chief. I have an idea. I'm going to do 3 and then play Inspiring Statuary. Is it Statuary? I feel like I'm saying it wrong, but I don't think I am. So, yeah. We'll also tap this and these 2 to play a Swiftfoot Boots. And then we'll pass. We would play a mountain. We would tap 2 of our blood tokens. Let's just pretend these 2 are tapped. To reduce this by 2 and just do a black and a red. We'll play Strefan. We'll scry 1. That's tough. I kind of want to put that at the bottom. I'll put that at the bottom. Swiftfoot Boots costs 1 to equip, so I'm going to tap the other mountain and equip Strefan with it. I'll swing in with Strefan. I'll sacrifice 2 blood tokens, if I can. There we go. I'll sacrifice that. And then I can play a vampire. Do I want to play Enowan the Ruined Sage, or do I want to play... I'll play an Arcana Revenant tapped and attacking with Indestructible. And then during my end step, this would be attacking a different player, so I would get 2 blood tokens, ideally. Swamp, I don't know I guess we're going to stop at turn 10. We're going to see what this deck can do in 10 turns. Tough. Red, red, 1, colorless, and 2. For Molten Echoes. Now, we're going to declare Vampire, obviously. Whenever a Vampire enters, we get a copy of it that's exiled during the end step. We have 2 mana from this swamp, and 3 from... We have 4... We can play Enowan the Ruins. I feel like we're going to play this from our hand tapped and attacking instead. So let's go swing, swing. Let's say we make a blood from the trample. And then we'll sacrifice 2 blood tokens to put Enowan the Ruined Sage tapped and attacking. And I get another copy, but that doesn't really matter in this instance. Because the copy would instantly die, and it doesn't have like an ETB, so. Whew. That's good. 1 and a red for Dominating Vampire. We scry 1. Oh, it's 1 and 2 red. That's fine. I'm going to put an exotic orchard at the bottom, weirdly enough, because we need more cards in our hand. I feel like we need more draw power. I don't want to get rid of the Olivia's Wrath, though. We do take control of that creature, so that's good. Um, let's trample in, and I guess we'll swing in with him, too. And then we'll get a blood token from that, and then 2 during the end step for Strefan. Last turn. Well, it doesn't really matter, because it's Tainted Peak. Um, This seems pretty good. Like, we cheated in enough vampires, and we have enough blood tokens that rummaging is a good idea. Because we have 6 blood tokens right now, you know? But I think that's enough testing. Uh, there's some other thing. Like, I didn't mention some cards. I think I didn't mention Bloodlord of Vazgoth or whatever. A lot of this is subjective. A lot of it is stuff that you want to add that you think look cool or whatever. Like, if I go to EDH Rex right now, once it loads, there's a ton of cards that I would run or whatever. Like, High Society Hunter's pretty good if you want another sack outlet. Voldaren Epicure is really good for a 1 mana. I mentioned this earlier, but Commander Sphere. Moonstone Eulogist, if I pronounced that right, is good. I just wish it was a vampire. There. I can't speak today. Florian Voldaren Scion is pretty good, but I have it in my Prosper deck, and I feel like it's better there, and I don't feel like buying a second copy. Urge Defeat is pretty good. If you like it as a removal spell. Again, the talismans are really good. I just didn't have room for it at the moment. I'll probably find something to add it in. Patchwork Banner's good if you can afford it. This is good because it gives your commander haste. The issue is it's 4 mana, and it kind of dies easy. Gluttonous Guest, I think I mentioned that. Ivor is really good, but I haven't, I did. I am re-recording this from the last one. So earlier I did say that I recorded this part after this card was announced, but I didn't. I did, but I'm re-recording it now. Bedevil's pretty good. Phyrexian Arena is really good in this. Veto's okay. Bloodline Keeper again is really good. I just don't want to pay $10 for it. Queen Base Paladin, I think I mentioned it's good if you don't mind finality counters. Blood Tracker can be good, but this is just what I ended up with. The deck list will be in the description if you care about that and want to see it. But I guess that's it. So I hope this helped you. I hope you made a Strefan deck that you really like, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Hi, thanks for watching. At least I assume you watched it. I don't see why you would skip to the outro specifically anyway. This is the first scripted anything I've ever fucking done, so I'm super nervous about putting it out there, and I hope you enjoyed it. Don't expect content like this super often since this took me ages to do, and I'm not even sure if I'm that good at it, to be honest. It's also that Strefan is just a deck I'm super passionate about and know a lot about because I've played it so many times and built it so many times and rebuilt it so many times. I have played the deck since this video was recorded, and that was a lot of fun. Olivia's Attendant specifically did like 6 damage or 7 damage with a +1/+1 counter, and I ended up having like 14 blood tokens, and all my vampires are just massive, and it kept getting life with lifelink. It was a fucking lot of fun. I do recommend the deck a lot if you like this kind of thing. Time for the boring YouTube stuff that I feel like I have to do. I have a Blue Sky, and the link to that'll be in the description. I post usually updates on the channel, previews of future videos, or whatever. I also have a Let's Play channel, which is also linked in the description. That might as well be my main channel at this point, seeing as I upload there every Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And for reference, that channel has like 150 videos, whereas this TCG one has like, what is it, 84, I think? Is it in the 80s? I think it is. I'm too lazy to check. This part's unscripted. I don't know if you can tell that or not, but it is. I guess that's all I wanted to say. If you like this video, let me know, and have a good day, I guess. I don't know how to end these videos. I suck at fucking outros. See you guys in the next video.